The notification arrived at 11:47 p.m. Dominic Chen's fingers froze above his keyboard. The private terminal in his glass-walled office displayed a single red alert. Archive access detected. Backup server 3. Impossible. Only he had those credentials. He'd buried that server beneath layers of encryption and misdirection. Below, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, 300 investors celebrated in the mansion's ballroom. Crystal chandeliers caught champagne bubbles. Laughter rose like incense. His father's empire, now his playground. The alert blinked again. Someone was inside the archive. Not browsing. Downloading. Dominic's jaw tightened. He pulled up the access logs. The IP address traced to inside the house. Staff quarters. His pulse hammered against his throat. Across the compound, past the Olympic pool and Japanese gardens, Ayana Washington sat cross-legged on her narrow bed. The old laptop balanced on her knees, its fan whirring like a tired heartbeat. Numbers cascaded down the screen in neat columns. Investor names, transaction IDs, routing codes that twisted and branched like tree roots. She didn't understand all of it, but she understood enough. Her 10-year-old fingers hovered over the touchpad. A folder labeled emergencyexit.exe pulsed in the directory. She clicked it. The screen flooded white, then revealed a countdown timer. 12 days, 4 hours, 23 minutes. Ayana's breath caught. Something was going to happen, something bad. 3 weeks earlier, the Chen mansion had gleamed in October sunlight, like a monument to inevitability. Grace Washington moved through its rooms the way water moves through stone. Constant, invisible, essential. 8 years she'd worked here, polishing marble that never seemed to dull, preparing meals for a family that rarely gathered to eat them. Her daughter, Ayana, did homework at the kitchen island each afternoon, slim legs swinging from the bar stool, dark braids bent over math problems. The Chens occupied the upper floors. Marcus Chen, tech billionaire, traveled 3 weeks per month. His wife had left 2 years ago. Amicable divorce, astronomical settlement. That left Dominic 24 years old. Stanford dropout, brilliant, restless, entitled in the way only third-generation wealth produces. He'd spent his teen years building apps that failed beautifully, always cushioned by his father's fortune. Grace kept her head down. Ayana kept her eyes open. She noticed things. The way Dominic threw away electronics like tissue paper. The laptop he'd tossed in the garage recycling bin last Tuesday, muttering about corrupted drives. The way he never looked at staff, not rudely, just blankly, like furniture. Ayana had retrieved the laptop after school. The screen was cracked in one corner, but when she plugged it in, it hummed to life. No password. Dominic had wiped it carelessly, but her father had taught her about recovery software. Daniel Washington had been a junior software engineer before the accident. Ayana inherited his curiosity, his careful hands, his belief that computers told stories if you learned their language. She'd been exploring the recovered files for 3 days when she found the folder marked Archive, Project Cascade. Inside, spreadsheets dense as forests, code that looped and redirected, and documents with words like liquidity event and offshore disbursement. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, always read the comments in code. That's where programmers tell the truth. She started reading. The ballroom had been full that night 2 weeks ago. Dominic stood on the small stage, backlit and magnetic. His royal blue suit caught the light. Behind him, a projection displayed the Prospertech Capital logo, sleek, modern, trustworthy. 40% annual returns, he said, his voice smooth as champagne. Guaranteed minimum. Our proprietary algorithm identifies micro-arbitrage opportunities in emerging markets. We're not talking theory. We're talking tested, proven, revolutionary. Grace stood in the kitchen doorway, watching through the server's entrance. Her pastor, Reverend Michaels, sat in the third row leaning forward. Beside him, Mrs. Chen from the church, no relation to the billionaires. clutched her husband's hand. The congregation had pooled resources, savings accounts, retirement funds. The dream of security. Dominic's presentation moved like water. Charts showing exponential growth. Testimonials from early investors. People Grace recognized from tech circles, their faces glowing with recorded enthusiasm. Her demo of the platform's interface. Clean, professional, intuitively trustworthy. Minimum investment, $10,000, Dominic continued. But we're opening a special community tier at $5,000 for qualified groups, churches, non-profits, organizations we believe in. Reverend Michaels had signed the papers that night. 60 families invested. Grace felt pride and anxiety twist together in her chest. Ayana had been upstairs doing homework. But the next afternoon, sitting at the kitchen island with the recovered laptop, she found the PowerPoint file in the archive. And beside it another file, presentation real numbers. She opened both. Compared them. The numbers didn't match. The public presentation showed profits. The private spreadsheet showed something else, a complex formula where new investments paid old investors. A loop that required constant growth. And at the bottom a notation in red. Emergency exit day 60 offshore transfer complete. Close platform. Ayana's stomach dropped. She scrolled through the code files. Found functions with names like redirect investment and mask origin and calculate drain rate. She didn't understand everything, but she understood theft. That evening Dominic walked through the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. He didn't look at Grace. Didn't see Ayana at the island. The laptop closed innocently beside her math textbook. 60 more today, he said into the phone, laughing. These community pools are perfect. Emotional investment. They won't question the delay. He grabbed a bottled water from the fridge and disappeared upstairs. Ayana's hands had gone cold. That night, Ayana couldn't sleep. She lay in her small room in the staff quarters, the converted pool house, behind the main mansion, and listened to her. Mother's breathing in the next room, steady, trusting, unaware. Her father's face filled her mind. Daniel, with his patient smile and careful hands, teaching her to see patterns in code. Every program is a conversation, he'd said, between the programmer and the machine. Read it like a story. She'd read Dominic's story. And it was about stealing. The numbers haunted her, not because they were large, though they were, millions flowing through digital channels, but because she knew the names attached to them. Mrs. Chen, who always brought extra groceries to church families. Mr. Baptiste, who'd driven her mother to the hospital when Ayana had pneumonia. The Johnsons, the Nguyens, the Rodriguezes, people who couldn't afford to lose $5,000, people who'd invested faith along with money. Ayana opened the laptop again. The screen's glow painted her face in blue light. She navigated back to the emergency exit exe file, stared at the code. Her father had taught her about loops and conditionals, variables and functions. This code was more complex, but the structure was familiar. It was a timer, a trigger. When the countdown reached 0, the program would execute a series of transfers, pulling every remaining dollar from the platform into an offshore account, then wiping the records, 60 days from launch. They were on day 48 now, 12 days left. Ayana's chest felt tight. She was 10 years old. Who would listen to her? But if she said nothing, 60 families would lose everything. Her fingers trembled on the keyboard. She started taking screenshots. Daniel Washington had died on a Tuesday. Ayana still remembered the officer's face at the door, carefully neutral, rehearsed sympathy. A drunk driver on Highway 101. Daniel's compact car hadn't stood a chance against the pickup truck. Before that, he'd been teaching her to code every evening after dinner. Simple Python scripts at first, programs that drew shapes or calculated math problems. Then gradually more complex, web scrapers, data sorters, small games with primitive graphics. Code is just instructions, he'd explained, his hands resting over hers on the keyboard. You tell the computer what to do, step by step. But you have to think like the computer. Logical, precise. He'd worked for a small cybersecurity firm in Oakland. Junior position, modest salary. But he'd loved the puzzle of it. Finding vulnerabilities, protecting systems, thinking 3 steps ahead of people with bad intentions. The internet remembers everything, he'd said once. People think they can hide, but data leaves trails. You just have to know how to look. After the accident, Grace had needed better pay. Marcus Chen's household manager had been hiring. The salary was nearly double what Grace made cleaning offices downtown. Live-in quarters included. Ayana could stay in good schools. Grace had taken the job with gratitude and grief. Now 2 years later, Ayana sat in those quarters with her father's lessons humming through her mind. She thought about data trails, about hidden paths in code, about the 60 families who'd trusted Dominic's smile and professional presentation. Reverend Michaels had announced the investment during Sunday service, called it a blessing, a chance to build generational wealth for their community. Families had scraped together money, some taking second mortgages, some emptying college funds. Grace had invested $3,000, everything she'd saved since Daniel's death. Ayana scrolled through the spreadsheet again, found her mother's name, Washington. Grace $3,000, invested $10.15, expected return $4,200. Actual allocation, $2,100, 30% redirect offshore. Her throat burned. Even the money her mother invested had been stolen before it entered the system. She pressed her palms against her eyes. Her father's voice returned. When you see something wrong, you have 2 choices. Look away or find the fix. Ayana opened a new document, started organizing the evidence. The back door was elegant, vicious, brilliant. Ayana spent 3 days mapping it, working in stolen hours after school, during her mother's shifts when the house felt empty. The code revealed itself layer by layer, like peeling an onion. Every investment into Prosper Tech Capital triggered multiple functions. First, the public ledger updated, showing the full amount deposited. That's what investors saw in their dashboards, clean, professional, growing. But simultaneously a hidden function executed, redirect primary. It siphoned 30% of each deposit into an offshore wallet before any calculations occurred. The remaining 70% entered the actual pool. From that pool, early investors received their returns, paid not from profits, but from new investors' money. Classic Ponzi structure, but the real theft was the backdoor. Dominic wasn't just running a scheme. He was stealing from his own scheme. The offshore account had accumulated $4.2 million in 6 weeks. Ayana found the wallet address in the code comments. Cryptocurrency, of course. Untraceable unless you knew where to look. She copied it into a text file. Then she found the timer. Emergency exit EXE was scheduled to execute on day 60. November 28th, the day before Thanksgiving. The program would drain the remaining pool, everything that hadn't been paid to early investors, into the offshore account. Then it would corrupt the database, making recovery impossible. Dominic would claim a cyber attack. Investigators would find destroyed records. Investors would lose everything. By the time anyone figured it out, the money would be gone. Laundered through a dozen jurisdictions, converted and reconverted invisible, Ayana's heart hammered. She took screenshots of everything. The code, the wallet address, the transaction log showing the 30% skim, the countdown timer. Her hands shook as she compiled it all into a folder. She didn't know what to do with it yet, but her father's training held firm. Document everything. Evidence can't lie. She was about to close the laptop when she noticed something else. A comment in the code, written by Dominic himself. A backup access from home server just in case. They'll never think to look at the old hardware. He'd been sloppy, arrogant, assumed no one would find the discarded laptop, assumed staff were invisible. Ayana felt something cold and clear settle in her chest. Not quite anger, not quite courage, Something in between. She saved everything to a USB drive, hid it in her bookshelf behind A Wrinkle in Time. Then she went to find her mother. Grace's hands trembled as she scrolled through the screenshots on Ayana's laptop. They sat in Grace's small room, door closed, voices low. The evening sun slanted through the window, painting everything gold and amber. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, tension coiled between them like wire. "Baby, I don't—" Grace's voice cracked. "I don't understand all this. Are you sure?" "Daddy taught me." Ayana pointed at the code. "And see, this function takes 30% before anything else happens. And this timer. Mom, in 12 days everyone loses everything." Grace pressed her knuckles against her mouth. 60 families. Reverend Michaels. Her own $3,000. "I have to tell Mr. Chen," she whispered. "He's in Tokyo," Ayana said. I checked the calendar. Grace stood. "Then I tell Dominic, maybe there's an explanation." Ayana wanted to scream, but her mother's face held something fragile. The need to believe that people with power weren't monsters. That the man they worked for wasn't stealing from the people Grace prayed with every Sunday. They found Dominic in his office. He looked up from his triple monitor setup, mildly annoyed at the interruption. Grace's voice was steady despite her shaking hands. "Mr. Dominic, Ayana found something." On an old laptop. Files about Prospertech. Dominic's expression didn't change. "Oh," he smiled, warm and dismissive. "Let me guess." Technical jargon that looks scary. "There's a timer," Grace said. "And code that moves money offshore, Mrs. Washington." Dominic stood, his voice patient, patronizing. "I appreciate the concern. But investment platforms are complex. What looks like irregularities to civilians is just standard protocol. Offshore accounts are for tax optimization. Completely legal. But the timer says emergency exit. That's a backup protocol. If the platform faces a cyber attack, we have automated protections." He placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. Gentle, dismissive. "I promise you, everything is not only legal, but audited by top firms. Your investment and your church's is completely safe." Grace wanted to believe him. Ayana could see it in her mother's face, the desperate hope that this man wasn't lying. "Thank you for bringing it to my attention," Dominic continued. "Shows good vigilance. But please don't worry, and maybe keep the old laptop away from curious kids." He winked at Ayana. "Technology can be confusing." They left. Grace's shoulders sagged with relief. Ayana felt ice in her stomach. That night she woke to voices. Crept to her door. Dominic's voice drifted from the garden, sharp with tension. "Yes, I'm sure. The maid's kid found the archive laptop. I handled it. Played it off as technical confusion." A pause. "Who's going to believe a 10-year-old? "Exactly. No, we're good. But move the timeline up. Execute the exit in 3 days instead of 12. I'm not taking chances." Ayana's world tilted. She backed into her room. Closed the door silently. 3 days, not 12. Her mother wouldn't fight harder. Dominic had neutralized the threat with a smile and a patronizing explanation. Ayana was alone. Grace tried calling Marcus Chen the next morning. His assistant answered from Tokyo. Professional, brisk. "Mr. Chen is in meetings through Friday. I can take a message?" Grace explained, haltingly aware of how absurd it sounded, that her daughter had found something concerning about Dominic's investment platform. "Could Mr. Chen call when he had a moment?" "I'll pass along the message," the assistant said. The line went dead. The message never reached Marcus. Dominic intercepted it within an hour. A text to his father's assistant. "Just household staff concerns already addressed. Please disregard." Ayana checked the countdown that afternoon. So 2 days, 18 hours, 43 minutes. The emergency exit had been moved up. Dominic was accelerating the theft. That evening, Reverend Michaels called Grace. His voice bubbled with excitement. "Sister Grace, did you see the email? Prospertech is doing system maintenance this weekend, then releasing our first returns on Monday. 40% in 6 weeks. The Lord is faithful. Grace made affirming sounds, hung up, stared at nothing. Ayana found her mother crying silently in the kitchen at midnight. Grace sat at the island in darkness, hands folded, tears sliding down her cheeks unchecked. "Mom," Ayana whispered. "I don't know what to do, baby." Grace's voice was hollow. "We need this job. If I push harder, Mr. Dominic could fire me. And if I'm wrong, if he really is telling the truth, I'll have made trouble for nothing. You're not wrong. I showed you the code. But who would believe us?" Grace looked at her daughter, a maid and her 10-year-old, against a billionaire's son. Ayana felt something crack and harden inside her chest. The same feeling she'd had at her father's funeral, this helpless, burning awareness that the world didn't care about fairness. That being right meant nothing if you didn't have power. But her father had taught her something else, something Dominic had forgotten. Code was power, and she knew how to read it. She went back to her room, opened the laptop, stared at the emergency door-to-exit exe file. Her father's friend James worked in cybersecurity. She hadn't seen him since the funeral. Uncle James, her dad had called him, though they weren't related. He'd given her his card at the service. "If you ever need anything." Ayana had kept the card. She pulled it from her desk drawer now. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Outside, the Chen mansion glowed against the night sky, all glass and marble and stolen money. She opened her email and started typing. Subject: Dad taught me to see patterns. I found one. Please help. She hit send. Then she sat in the darkness, watching the countdown tick toward 0, and waited for someone to believe her. James Chen, no relation to the billionaires, responded at 6:47 a.m. Subject: Dad taught me to see patterns. I found one. Please help, Ayana, I remember you. Your dad was brilliant. Send me what you found, all of it. I'm coming today. Relief hit Ayana like vertigo. She forwarded everything, screenshots, code files, transaction logs, the wallet address. The countdown timer now reading 01 day 09 hours 12 minutes. But even with James responding, the morning felt apocalyptic. Grace moved through the mansion like a ghost, cleaning rooms that didn't need cleaning. Avoiding Dominic's floor, Reverend Michaels had texted her 3 times about the upcoming payout celebration, planned for Monday. The church had rented a hall. Families were planning how to spend their returns. Ayana sat in her room, feeling the weight of knowledge like stones in her chest. She was 10 years old. Even with James believing her, what could they actually do? Dominic had lawyers. His father had influence that stretched across continents. The emergency exit would trigger tomorrow at midnight. By Monday morning, when families expected celebrations, they'd find empty accounts and destroyed records. She pressed her face against her knees. Her father's old hoodie, emerald green, too big for her, smelled faintly of his cologne. She'd kept it for 2 years, wearing it when everything felt impossible. When you see something wrong, you have 2 choices. Look away or find the fix. But what if the fix was too big? What if she was too small? Her phone buzzed. James, on my way. 2 hours. Don't touch anything else. Just wait. Ayana waited. The countdown ticked. The mansion hummed with oblivious wealth, and somewhere in an offshore account, $4.2 million sat like a coiled snake, waiting to strike. James arrived at 3 p.m. carrying a laptop bag and wearing the face of someone who'd seen something terrible. They met in the staff quarters. Grace served coffee with shaking hands. James spread his equipment across the small dining table, laptop, external drives, cables that snaked between devices like veins. "Show me everything," he said quietly. Ayana walked him through it. The recovered files, the backdoor code, the offshore wallet, the Ponzi structure hidden beneath professional veneer. The countdown timer now at 22 hours 14 minutes. James's jaw tightened with each revelation. He'd worked in cybersecurity for 15 years, had seen fraud before. But this was surgical. vicious, and it was targeting people he knew. Grace's church community included families he'd met at Daniel's funeral. "This is federal," he said finally. "Wire fraud, criminal conspiracy, SEC violations. He's looking at 15 years minimum. Can you stop it?" Grace whispered. James rubbed his face. "The problem isn't evidence. You've documented everything. The problem is time and power. If we go to authorities now, they'll need warrants, investigations, processes. Dominic's lawyers will stall. By the time anyone acts, the exit will have executed. Money gone. Records corrupted. Then what do we do?" Ayana's voice was small but steady. James looked at her, really looked at her, and saw Daniel in her eyes. That same clarity, that same refusal to accept injustice as inevitable. "We use the back door against him," James said slowly. "The emergency exit is a program. Programs can be intercepted. If we can trigger it early, redirect the drainage, and document everything in real time, we create evidence that can't be denied. A public permanent record." "How?" Grace asked. James turned to Ayana. "Your father taught you about blockchain, right?" She nodded. "Distributed ledgers. Public record of transactions. Exactly. We trigger the exit tonight. But instead of letting the money disappear offshore, we redirect it to a public wallet, one we control temporarily. The drainage becomes visible, every transaction recorded on a public blockchain. Then we simultaneously send everything to the FBI, SEC, and every news outlet we can reach. Will it work?" Grace's hands were clasped prayer-tight. "It has to." James pulled up code on his screen. "Ayana, I need your help. We're going to rewrite the exit function." "Can you do that?" Ayana looked at the countdown. 21 hours, 47 minutes. She thought of her father's hands guiding hers on a keyboard. His patient voice, "You tell the computer what to do step by step." "Yes," she said. "I can do that." They worked through the afternoon and into evening. Grace brought sandwiches they barely touched. The code was complex, but James knew systems and Ayana knew patterns. Together they rebuilt the emergency exit, changing the destination wallet, adding documentation triggers, creating an audit trail that would execute automatically. At 11 p.m., they were ready. James looked at Ayana. "Once we trigger this, there's no going back. Dominic will know. His father will know." "Are you sure?" Ayana thought of Reverend Michaels, Mrs. Chen, the 60 families counting on Monday's celebration, her mother's $3,000, her father's lessons. "I'm sure," she said. Her finger hovered over the enter key. The Prospertech Capital Gala began at 8 p.m. the next evening, Saturday night. The mansion transformed into celebration. Dominic had planned it perfectly. Investors gathered in the ballroom. Not the 60 families from Grace's church, but the wealthy early investors. The ones who'd already been paid with stolen money. The ones whose testimonials would lure more victims. He stood on stage in a charcoal suit, backlit by projections of soaring graphs. Champagne flowed. 300 people applauded his brilliance. "Tonight we announce Phase 2, Dominic said, his voice smooth and confident. "Expansion into international markets. Triple the returns. This is just the beginning." Upstairs in Grace's small quarters, Ayana sat cross-legged with the laptop balanced on her knees. James stood behind her, phone in hand. Grace watched from the doorway, hands clasped. The countdown read, 0 hours 04 minutes 18 seconds now. Ayana whispered. James nodded. "Now." She pressed enter. The modified emergency exit executed instantly. On-screen code cascaded, functions firing in sequence. The offshore wallet began to drain. But instead of disappearing into cryptocurrency oblivion, every transaction redirected to the public wallet James had created. Each transfer documented. Each theft recorded on an immutable blockchain. $0.2 million moved in 90 seconds. All of it visible. All of it traceable. Simultaneously, James hit send on 50 emails. FBI Cybercrime Division, SEC Enforcement. Every major news outlet, tech journalists, financial investigators, each email contained the evidence package, code, screenshots, transaction logs, the public wallet address showing the drainage in real time. In the ballroom, Dominic's phone vibrated. Then again, then continuously he glanced down. His face drained of color, an FBI notification, an SEC alert, a CNN breaking news push, Tech Air's investment platform exposed as elaborate fraud. His hand shook. The room blurred. He looked up to see his father's head of security approaching with federal agents flanking him. Dominic Chen? The lead agent's voice cut through the music. FBI, you're under arrest for wire fraud and criminal conspiracy. The ballroom went silent. 300 faces turned. Champagne glasses frozen mid-air. Dominic's mouth opened. No sound emerged. Another agent stepped forward. We have evidence of systematic theft from investors through a concealed backdoor in your platform. We're seizing all assets and servers. Phones throughout the room lit up. Investors checking news alerts, searching Prosper Tech Capital, seeing their portfolios frozen under federal investigation. Someone screamed. Others began shouting. The careful facade of success shattered like dropped crystal. Marcus Chen's private jet had just landed at SFO. His phone exploded with calls. His assistant's voice panicked. Sir, the FBI is at the house. Dominic's been arrested. The news, it's everywhere. In the staff quarters, Grace sank into a chair, tears streaming. Not grief, relief. Overwhelming, dizzying relief. Ayana watched the news alerts multiply on screen. Every major outlet. The evidence spreading like wildfire through digital networks, impossible to suppress or spin. James squeezed her shoulder. Oh, your father would be so proud. On screen, the public blockchain showed every stolen dollar now frozen, traceable, recoverable. The fraud laid bare in code that couldn't lie. Dominic was led out in handcuffs, photographers' flashes painting him in stark white light. His face, so confident hours before, now showed only shock and fear. The mansion's light seemed harsh suddenly. Expensive and cold. Grace's phone rang. Reverend Michael's, his voice shaking with disbelief and gratitude. The church families had been saved. The money would be returned. Ayana closed the laptop gently. Her hands had stopped shaking. Justice, it turned out, could fit in a 10-year-old's palms if she knew which keys to press. 2 months later, winter light slanted through different windows. The Chen mansion had been seized as part of the investigation. Marcus Chen faced charges as an accessory. He'd known about irregularities, emails proved, and had chosen ignorance over action. The empire built on innovation crumbled under the weight of his son's greed. Dominic took a plea deal. 15 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for at least 10. The frozen funds, all $4.2 million, plus the remaining pool, were returned to investors. Every penny accounted for, documented in the blockchain record that Ayana and James had created. 60 families received their original investments back. Some cried. Some prayed. All of them knew who'd saved them. Grace found work with the Thompsons, a family in Berkeley who treated their staff like humans, who paid fair wages and said thank you. The new house was smaller, warmer, filled with laughter instead of cold marble silence. Ayana kept the old laptop. James had refurbished it properly, upgraded the memory, replaced the cracked screen. It sat on her new desk. White paint, her own room with windows that opened to a garden where she could actually play. She coded most evenings now, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. James had gotten her accepted into a youth cybersecurity program at his company. Weekends she learned advanced programming. Weeknights she helped James develop educational software for kids who loved patterns and puzzles. The scholarship had come through too. Full ride through high school, guaranteed admission to Stanford or MIT if she wanted it. Not from the Chens, their fortune was being liquidated to pay settlements and fines, but from a collective of tech companies who'd read her story and seen potential. One Saturday afternoon, Grace found Ayana at her desk, lines of code scrolling across the screen. "What are you building, baby?" "A program that detects Ponzi schemes," Ayana said without looking up. "It analyzes transaction patterns. If money's being paid in circles instead of generating real returns, it flags it." Grace smiled, kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Your father would be so proud." Ayana thought of Daniel. His patient hands, his steady voice. The way he'd taught her that code was just another language for telling truth from lies. She saved her work. Outside, evening settled gently. No more countdowns. No more stolen millions. Just the quiet hum of a computer and the knowledge that sometimes the smallest voice can break the biggest silence if it knows the right words to say. In the quiet moments between code and sleep, between lessons learned and futures unwritten, Ayana sometimes thought about power, not the kind that came from wealth or family names or glass mansions overlooking cities, but the kind that came from seeing clearly, from refusing to look away when looking away would be easier. Her father had taught her that programs were just instructions, that computers followed logic, not lies, that if you knew the language, you could make truth visible. Dominic had believed his privilege made him invisible, that staff were furniture, children were powerless, and money could erase any crime. He'd been brilliant, Stanford-educated, fluent in code and deception, but he'd forgotten the first rule of programming. Someone is always reading your code. The powerful rarely fall on their own. They build walls of lawyers and influence, surround themselves with people too afraid or too compromised to challenge them. They count on invisibility, their own visibility and everyone else's invisibility. They forget that invisible doesn't mean powerless, that the child at the kitchen island, the maid cleaning rooms, the junior engineer teaching his daughter on quiet evenings, they see everything. And sometimes they know exactly what to do with what they've seen. Justice isn't about size, it's about clarity. About the courage to press enter when your hands are shaking. About believing that truth, properly documented and fearlessly shared, can break through any wall. Ayana typed the last line of her new program. Saved it, backed it up. Outside her window, stars appeared above Berkeley, the same stars that shone over prisons where fraud bloomed, over courtrooms where evidence spoke louder than money, over small rooms where other invisible people were learning to see patterns and refuse silence. Her father's voice whispered through memory one last time, "Code is power." But the hand that wields it chooses justice or greed. Ayana had chosen, and in choosing, had proven that the smallest hands can write the most powerful code if they know which keys to press and refuse to stop pressing until the truth compiles.